The voice wasn't loud. That was the part Ava would later try to explain to the police officer, whose pen hovered uncertainly above his notepad. It wasn't a shout or even a normal speaking voice. It was intimate, like lips just behind her right ear, so close she could almost feel breath warming her skin. Just her name, Ava, male, calm, as though the speaker had all the time in the world to wait for her response. Ava had spun around so quickly that water from the dinner plate she was washing splashed across her kitchen floor. The apartment was empty. It had been empty all evening. That was 3 weeks ago. Now she sat in her office at the University of Vermont Archives, fingers hovering over her keyboard as the cursor blinked accusingly. She'd been staring at the same catalog entry for 15 minutes. The third time this week, she'd found herself frozen, listening, waiting for something she couldn't name. The voice had returned 5 times since that first night, always when she was alone, always saying just her name, nothing more, always gone when she turned to look. Her doctor had mentioned stress, suggested more sleep, fewer overtime hours cataloging, the university's endless boxes of forgotten documents. The doctor hadn't said hallucinations, but Ava heard the word anyway, floating in the careful pauses between medical reassurances. She rubbed her eyes and focused on the document before her, a donation receipt from 1953. The university had received 12 boxes of administrative records from a place called Haven House. The receipt noted, short-term residential facility, psychiatric evaluation center, Burlington location, operational 1953-1955. Something about the name tugged at Ava's memory, though she couldn't place why. She'd been working through this collection for weeks without noticing anything special about it. Just more faded, typewritten forms, carbon-copied letters, and staff meeting minutes from a long-closed institution. Ava glanced at the clock, 6:38 p.m. She was alone in the archives again, everyone else gone for the day. Her colleague Ellen had invited her for drinks, concerned about Ava's increasing distraction, the dark circles under her eyes. But Ava had declined. How could she explain that she'd started mapping out when the voice appeared, that it only came when she was completely alone, that she was beginning to think the voice knew her schedule, her habits, her routines? Ellen would certainly recommend therapy then, and Ava wasn't ready to discuss any of this with a professional. Not yet. Not until she understood what was happening. As she filed away the Haven House receipt, her fingers brushed against another folder she didn't remember pulling. Inside was a single sheet, a patient intake form with most identifying information redacted. Just an ID number, 0914A, and a handwritten note in the margin. Subject responds only to the sound of their own name. Ava's hands trembled slightly. September 14th was her birthday. She checked the folder label. This document wasn't supposed to be here. According to the catalog, Box 42B should contain only administrative correspondence from 1954, not patient records. She placed the form on her desk and took a photo with her phone. Taking documents home was strictly against protocol, but she needed to examine this away from the quiet, watching silence of the archives after hours. As she slipped the form back into its folder, the overhead lights flickered once briefly. Ava froze. Then she hurriedly gathered her things, locked her office door, and walked quickly through the dim corridors of the basement archives toward the exit. In the empty elevator, she found herself staring at her reflection in the polished metal doors. Her face looked thinner than usual, her eyes wider. The elevator stopped on the main floor with a soft chime that made her jump. As the doors slid open, she heard it. Ava, soft, close to her ear. She spun around. The elevator was empty. That night in her apartment, Ava taped the photo of the intake form to her living room wall. Below it, she wrote the date of the first time she heard the voice. She added other notes, times, locations, what she'd been doing. Was there a pattern? Something logical that would explain what was happening? She'd always been methodical, organized. Colleagues joked that she was an archivist by nature as much as profession. There was always order to be found if you looked carefully enough. She barely slept. At 3:17 a.m., she found herself standing in her kitchen, unsure how long she'd been there or why she'd gotten up. On the counter was her phone, open to the photo of the intake form. Next to it was a notepad where she'd apparently written Haven House basement level in her own handwriting. She didn't remember writing it. The next morning, bleary-eyed from lack of sleep, Ava returned to the archives with a new sense, though of purpose. She would find every reference to Haven House in the university records. She would reconstruct what this place had been, why it closed after only 18 months of operation, and why its records had ended up fragmented across the university's holdings. 3 days later, her office walls were covered with sticky notes and index cards. Haven House had been a psychiatric evaluation facility funded by a government grant. It had specialized in cognitive integration therapy for patients experiencing identity fragmentation and temporal displacement. The medical jargon was vague, the methodologies unclear. What was apparent was the high staff turnover. 28 staff members had resigned or transferred in the facility's brief existence, and the director, a Dr. Thomas Breyer, had disappeared entirely in late 1955. No resignation letter, no transfer records, no obituary. Ava was taping up another index card when Ellen knocked on her open door. "Earth to Ava," she said, smiling uncertainly. "You didn't come to the department meeting. Is everything okay?" Ava turned, blocking the wall of notes with her body. "Just caught up in this Haven House catalog project," she said, forcing a smile. "Did I miss anything important?" Ellen's eyes drifted to the wall behind Ava, then back to her face. "We were discussing the university's anniversary exhibition. They want items from the archives to display. Are you sure you're all right? You look exhausted." "I'm fine," Ava said too quickly. "Just working late. This collection is more complicated than I expected." Ellen hesitated, then stepped further into the office. "Haven House?" she read from one of the visible index cards. "Wasn't that the mental health facility that had all those ethical complaints? The one where that doctor disappeared?" Ava felt a chill. "You know about it?" "A little. My grandmother was a nurse in Burlington in the 50s. She mentioned it once. Said they were doing some kind of experimental therapy there. Memory work or something." Ellen frowned. "But why are you so interested in it? I thought you were working on the university administrative archives this quarter." "I am. These records were donated by the university board. They took over the facility's assets after it closed." Ava was surprised by how easily the lie came. "I'm just trying to organize everything properly." After Ellen left, Ava sat at her computer and searched the university's digital archives for any mention of Thomas Breyer. Most records from that era hadn't been digitized, but faculty photos had been scanned as part of an anniversary project 5 years earlier. She found him in a 1954 department photo, tall, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses and a serious expression. Something about his face was familiar, though she was certain she'd never seen him before. The next day, a manila envelope was waiting on her desk. No return address, no note. Inside was a carbon copy of a psychiatric assessment. At the top, written in blue ink that looked fresher than the rest of the document, was her name, Ava Mendez. The assessment was signed by Thomas Breyer and dated September 14, 1954, her birth date but decades before she was born. The final notation read, "Subject exhibits recurring recognition delusions, often reporting voices that speak her name. When she is alone, condition is self-reinforcing, treatment discontinued." Attached was a faded photograph of a woman who looked unsettlingly like Ava. Same dark hair, same posture, but with sharper features and a hollowness to her eyes that made Ava's stomach clench. She flipped the photo over. Written on the back, "Mendez A.A. Session 7. Ava's hands trembled as she placed the envelope in her bag. Someone was playing an elaborate trick on her. Someone with access to the archives and to photo editing software. But who and why? The resemblance in the photo was approximate but not perfect, like looking at a cousin rather than a twin. Could it be real? That evening, she took the file to Ellen's office, determined to get another perspective. "Have you ever seen anything like this?" she asked, sliding the assessment across the desk. "Someone left it for me. I think someone's trying to mess with me." Ellen examined the document with a frown, then looked up at Ava with concern. "Ava," she said gently, You showed me this file last year. Remember, you said you found it, but then decided to destroy it. The room seemed to tilt slightly. That's not possible, Ava said. I never saw this before today. Ellen's frown deepened. You were really interested in Haven House last spring. You spent weeks going through those records. You don't remember? Ava felt cold sweat on her palms. I've only been working with these records for the past month. No, Ellen said slowly. You catalogued the Haven House collection last April. You finished it. The finding aid is on the shared drive. When Ava got home that night, she set up her laptop's webcam and an audio recorder before going to bed, just to be certain, just to have proof. Either that she was being gaslighted or that she was losing her mind. In the morning, she reviewed the footage with trembling hands. At 3:18 a.m., the video showed her empty apartment. The audio picked up the soft creak of floorboards. Then, clear as day, a man's voice. Ava. Calm, almost affectionate. But what made her drop her coffee mug, shattering it across the kitchen tile, was what happened next in the video. The door to her bedroom opened, and Ava herself walked out. Sleepwalking. Eyes open but vacant. She walked to the window, opened it slightly, then returned to bed. The Ava watching the video had no memory of doing this. At work, she frantically searched the shared drive for the Haven House finding aid Ellen had mentioned. It was there, a complete catalog of the collection, meticulously organized. The creation date was April 17th of the previous year. The author was listed as Ava Mendez. She opened the document. It was her work, her writing style, her organizational approach. But she had no memory of creating it. At the bottom of the document was a note. Collection contains sensitive psychiatric records. Access restricted. Note anomaly in box 42B. Patient IDs 09 to 14A appears to be filed incorrectly. Ava's hands hovered over her keyboard as she struggled to understand. Had she done all this work and somehow forgotten? Had she previously discovered the same connections she was finding now? Was she repeating investigations she'd already completed? She checked the visitor log at the front desk. It showed she had signed in at 8:43 that morning, but she hadn't arrived until after 11 Kyle. The signature matched her handwriting perfectly. That afternoon, she found herself drawn to the basement level of the archives, to a section she rarely visited. Old microfilm records were stored there, along with overflow from the university's less accessed collections. A box sat on a reading table as if waiting for her, unmarked, no accession number. Inside was a single file folder containing newspaper clippings about Thomas Breyer's disappearance. The police had searched for weeks. His car was found at a bus station. His apartment was empty except for case files spread across his desk. The final article mentioned that his research had focused on memory consolidation and identity perception, the ways in which people recognize themselves across time. As Ava read, she became aware of movement in her peripheral vision. Someone else was in the basement archives. She could hear the soft shuffle of footsteps on the concrete floor, moving between the tall shelving units. "Hello?" she called. No answer. She gathered the newspaper clippings and moved quickly toward the exit. As she passed a dark row of shelves, she heard it again. Ava, close to her ear. She spun around, heart pounding. No one was there. But on the shelf at eye level was a small tape recorder, its reels turning slowly. Next to it was a note in her own handwriting. "It's not a voice, it's an echo." Ava stumbled backward, dropping the clippings. Her heel caught on something, a loose carpet edge, and she fell, striking her head against the corner of a metal shelf. Pain exploded behind her eyes, and then darkness. She woke to fluorescent lights and the antiseptic smell of a hospital room. Ellen was sitting beside the bed, relief washing over her face as Ava opened her eyes. "Thank God," Ellen said. "You've been out for hours. They found you in the basement archives. You hit your head pretty badly." Ava tried to sit up, wincing at the pain. "The tape recorder," she said. "Did they find it?" Ellen looked confused. "What tape recorder?" "It was on the shelf. It was playing my name. Someone recorded it." Ellen's expression shifted to concern. "Ava, there was no tape recorder. The security guard found you alone. You'd fallen and hit your head." Check my phone, Ava insisted. The video from last night. It picked up the voice. Ellen hesitated, then reached for Ava's bag on the bedside table. She found the phone and handed it to Ava, who quickly navigated to her videos. The file from the night before was there. She played it for Ellen. The video showed Ava's empty apartment. Then came the sound of creaking floorboards. Then silence. No voice called her name. No Ava walked out of the bedroom to open a window. The footage showed 8 hours of an empty, quiet apartment. "I don't understand," Ava whispered. "It was there, I heard it. I saw myself sleepwalking." Ellen took her hand gently. "The doctor said you've been experiencing some confusion, probably from stress and lack of sleep. They want to keep you overnight, for observation because of the concussion." After Ellen left, Ava lay in the darkened hospital room trying to make sense of everything. Was she losing her mind? Was someone gaslighting her? Or was something even stranger happening? A nurse came in to check her vital signs. As she adjusted the IV, Ava asked, "Has anyone been in to see me besides my friend?" "No visitors," the nurse said, making a note on her chart. Then she paused. "Though someone did leave flowers at the nurse's station for you earlier. No card." After the nurse left, Ava carefully disconnected her IV and slipped out of bed. Her head throbbed, but she needed to see those flowers. At the nurse's station, a small arrangement of white lilies sat in a simple glass vase. Tucked among the stems was a folded piece of paper. She extracted it quickly and returned to her room. Under the dim light, she unfolded the note. It was a page torn from a journal, the handwriting neat but hurried. "Ava, this is the third time we've reached this point. You will not remember the others. The voice you hear is your own, recorded during previous cycles. You are both patient and researcher now. Briar's work continued through you. Time isn't linear in perception. Identity isn't fixed. You discovered this last year and the year before. I cannot intervene directly again. The paradox becomes too unstable. Look for the red notebook in your apartment, behind the bookshelf. I've left it there each time. When this cycle ends, another begins. You always hear your name first, TB." Ava stared at the initials. Thomas Briar. A man who had disappeared in 1955. A man who couldn't possibly have left this note. A man who couldn't know about the voice she'd been hearing. 2 days later, she returned to her apartment. Against medical advice, against Ellen's concerned protests, she went straight to the tall bookshelf in her living room and pulled it away from the wall. There, in the gap between the shelf and the wall, was a red notebook. Inside, in her own handwriting, was a detailed journal documenting 2 previous cycles of the exact same events she had just experienced. The voice, Haven House, the records. The photograph of a woman who looked like her, the head injury. Each cycle contained the same elements but with slight variations, and each ended the same way, with Ava back in her apartment finding the notebook, and then the final pages of each cycle's entries were torn out. On the last remaining page was written, "When you hear your name again, the new cycle begins. The only way to break it is to..." The rest was missing. Ava sat on her floor surrounded by scattered pages, trying to comprehend what she was reading. Was this an elaborate hoax, a psychotic break, or something that defied conventional explanation? She gathered the pages and placed them carefully on her desk. She would approach this methodically, as she did all archival mysteries. She would find the pattern, the explanation, the truth. As night fell, she found herself growing drowsy despite her determination to stay awake. She made coffee and sat at her kitchen table, the red notebook open before her. She began to write her own entry, documenting everything that had happened, everything she had discovered. As the clock ticked past midnight, her eyes grew heavy. She rested her head on her arms just for a moment. She didn't hear the soft footsteps crossing her kitchen floor, didn't see the figure that gently took the pen from her hand and carefully tore the pages she had just written from the notebook. Didn't notice as those pages were placed in a folder, along with others from previous cycles. She didn't feel herself being guided to bed, didn't register the window being opened slightly to match the pattern seen in the video that never existed. In the morning, Ava woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window. She felt refreshed, for the first time in weeks. The strange dreams and anxieties that had plagued her seemed to have dissipated overnight. She showered, dressed, and prepared for a normal day at the archives. As she washed her breakfast dishes, humming softly to herself, she didn't notice the red notebook now hidden behind her bookshelf, didn't remember the voice, or Haven House, or Thomas Breyer. Those memories had been filed away, archived in a part of her mind she could no longer access. She was drying a plate when she heard it, close to her ear, soft but distinct. A man's voice, calm, almost affectionate. Ava. She turned quickly, water dripping from her hands. No one was there. If this story kept you on edge until now, like this video and subscribe. The next one might be waiting for you right now. And there's one more, waiting just over there. Maybe it explains what's missing from this one. Maybe it makes everything worse. You've listened, but not everything has been told.